Either way, we're probably going to be doing. Oh,
we're live. Hello, hello. Well, there you go. We're a few minutes behind 2 o'clock. So thank you for your patience. I know you've been waiting so much for this very first Partner Live. So thank you all for joining us. I'm Daniel from Clearbanc, and I have my friend here, Oscar from Bench, joining us today. Oscar, how you doing?
I'm very well, Dan. How are you? I mean, we've been talking for the last few minutes, so I know how you are, but nice to be here.
Yeah, no, great to be here. Great to be doing this with you. So as we were talking about in our little dry run, today I'm very excited to be touching on a couple of interesting topics with Oscar and the Bench team. They've been wonderful partners of ours for 2020. One of the first partners I brought on as I joined the partnerships team here. And so some of the things that I think are really interesting are Bench has spent a ton of time on the PPP program and the CARES Act. So I think there's a lot of insights that Oscar can share on that front on how their companies are doing, creative stories that have come out of it. And then separate from that, I think I'd love to dig into more, as we hurtle towards year end, people are, trying to figure out how to eke out every last dollar and dime to grow the business so they can take a nice, well-deserved break for the holidays. But all of that might be for naught if you're not thinking about the other side of the business, which is bookkeeping and logging it all down. To run a business, you have to file your books. You have to close out the year. As I was talking about last time, I used to run a company, bookkeeping. I was incredibly terrible at, and didn't do as best of a job as I could. And I'm now learning with some other projects I have on the go, the importance of understanding things like tax deductions and what you can deduct and how can't you deduct it, and can I eke out some extra money through work from home expenses or not? How does that work if I'm an employee versus self-employed versus incorporated? So anyways, I think there's lots to dig into, but maybe we can start with a bit about what you're focused on right now at Bench, and a bit about where things sit out with PPP, because I know there's a new announcement that came out on that front.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, at Bench, I work on our partnerships team here, and when I'm not working with Clearbanc, I actually spend a lot of time working with our tax partnerships. So obviously, bookkeeping and tax are so intertwined, and funny enough, the people that I spend most of my time with now are the clients that I actually see are people that have kind of neglected bookkeeping and haven't filed their taxes and haven't done it for a few years, and have found themselves, whacked with penalties, interest, tax liens, tax levies, and just need to get themselves out of a hole. So it's kind of interesting being here, kind of talking about tips and tricks and what people can do to stay on top of their bookkeeping, knowing that, I know for a fact that there are 10 million taxpayers a year in the States that don't file their returns.
That's scary.
and just kind of seeing the other side of that, it gets me such a good appreciation of how important it is to stay on top of it as it's going on, rather than having to play catch up in 2 years' time, just because you've been so wildly trying to just grow your business and do whatever you can to take care of the day to day. So that's a bit about that.
Yeah. So the thing that's curious for me, so I spent right when PPP came out, every day they felt there was like a new regulation or a new, and it sounds like that hasn't really stopped. There's always something new coming out, but inevitably, whether it's tomorrow or next year, like PPP funding will run out. And I'd be curious to see, in your conversations or what you've observed with your clients, what are people doing to plan for that? And looking at the chat, we have actually some Canadian folks out here. We have Peter in here from Vancouver, Boz, if I'm pronouncing that right, from Toronto. So thanks all for joining. So I think that broadly would apply to folks in Canada too, even though PPP is a US program. We have our own version of that in Canada, and inevitably funding is going to run out if it hasn't already. And so, what have you seen as being effective ways people have kind of managed that when there's no more government funding flowing in?
Yeah, it's such a good question. It's such a difficult thing to give like concrete answers that's going to work for everyone. But one thing I'd say is that if you're relying on kind of government sources of income to kind of keep your business going, and you kind of see that there's obviously an end to that story, it's like such a good time to actually know where you're spending your money as a business. And so there are two ways that you can look at it. One is that you put in like, this is like the time when you just want to be thinking, I want to be thinking emergency budget. I want to be thinking, what are the things that I'm spending money on that I really don't have to at the moment? Are there any projects that I'm working on that I can put off to next year? Are there any areas of the business that are maybe not performing as well as others and I can just kind of discontinue them for a bit? These are all decisions that you can make when you've got a good handle on the monthly state of your finances in your books. And it's so difficult to do that if you're running around trying to, hit targets for Cyber Monday, Black Friday, whatever, and you're just kind of doing everything by feel, and you kind of think, this product maybe, I'm not selling as much of this, but maybe my margins aren't quite as good on this product as they are on this one. Bookkeeping is going to tell you that for facts, and you can look at those numbers and you can make decisions on how is my business going to get through these months. And so one side of it is financial, Dan, and the other side of it is just kind of strategy. And this is where, I'm sure that you guys with all the founders that you kind of work with have seen loads of stories, but we've had bench clients completely pivot the way they're doing business, just to kind of accommodate the way that people are buying now. It's such a good time to move everything online. And if you haven't been making the most of having an e-commerce platform, then now's the time to get into it. If you haven't been delivering your goods, now's the time to do it. If you're relying people to coming in and buying them in person, not a good time for that right now.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point on that. Like, I'm sure everyone's seen this very famous graph, but the first 8 weeks of COVID, let's call it, starting from mid-March to mid-May, the percentage of e-commerce penetration basically doubled. And so what we thought would take place over 3, 10, whatever years, whatever kind of metrics you were looking at, happened in 8 weeks. And what's been not surprising is that's been pretty stuck. So when you look at our client base, a lot of people, even like personal anecdotes, people who aren't used to buying food online are now very comfortable doing, and they're like, why would I ever go to a store to do that again? Or if I'm on subscription for something that I've become accustomed to, why would I cancel a subscription to something I like? Even for me personally, I used to spend very little money on Instacart as an example, and now most of my groceries are done through Instacart and delivery and stuff like that, because at least we have that here in Toronto. So you had mentioned there was kind of one client you observed that pivoted into the mask business, and I'm curious if you want to talk through that or any other stories you've seen on that front.
Yeah, I've got a couple that spring to mind. Two are actually two are bench clients that I heard about kind of in the early days, and one of them made trumpet cases and like really ornamental musical instrument cases. Like some of them were out of kind of animal skin and other like slightly dubious areas, but anyway, he made trumpet cases, and he pivoted to actually making kind of the non-medical masks that you see everywhere, which is pretty crazy. And then there was another person, another founder that made pinball machines, and like all the parts that you would use for kind of classic arcade pinball machines, and obviously there's a big perspex thing that you play pinball behind, and so they kind of took that element of their business and turned those perspex guards into like selling those to businesses, to hospitals, to wherever, which is pretty awesome. And then the one where I was chatting to you about before we kind of went live, which was actually a Clearbanc founder who I know that prior to pandemic was selling, they were doing all right, but they were selling hair straighteners and hair products on Amazon, and went straight to doing hand sanitizers and masks, and they were netting a serious amount of money when things took off. So it's a great time to be opportunistic.
Yeah, I mean, like one of the values we have at Clearbanc is speed, and so I think the best founders move quickly and move where there's opportunity, and as long as they can support these multiple business lines, I think that's incredibly important.
For sure.
One thing before we move off the topic of PPP, and maybe Richard or someone from the bench team can drop the link in the chat. Would love to know, like, what's the best way to keep up to date with that kind of stuff? Because I found it very difficult where, like, my job, your job, we're both in the financial sector. So we need to understand PPP. I will read the 30-page government document to understand what they mean. But if I'm running a business, like, I could really care less about the details so long as I can understand the key points for me, right? What are ways, you recommend people keep up to date with government funding broadly, and how are you guys supporting them?
Well, look, I would not be doing my job, and I'm sure I'd be fired on the spot if I didn't use this opportunity to talk about the Bench blog, because since from day one, we've kind of pivoted very quickly to having a dedicated team within Bench that all they do day in, day out is monitor this stuff. And we put daily updates where appropriate of anything that's going on in the world of CARES Act, PPP, HEROES Act that's kind of around the corner, all that sort of stuff. I speak from kind of personal frustration that in the summer I was putting out YouTube videos almost once a week on the developments, and they were doing pretty well. And then every video would see the last one completely obsolete because the information would just change. And all these people had asked questions, and we given answers, and it completely, like, from one day it's different to the next. But currently the big thing with PPP is forgiveness. Most people have probably used up the money that they were given by now. They've kind of, there was this idea down was this covered period. It was supposed to cover like a 10-week period that you had the loan. And for most people, that's run out now. And so now they're looking to, like, how do I get this loan forgiven? Because that was the really attractive part of the loan, was it was essentially, it could be written off if you kind of played the rules and you didn't go around buying Lamborghinis and and speedboats. So the big thing with that is keeping kind of track of, like, what is your financial institution currently accepting forgiveness applications? If so, which forms you need to use to actually go through that process. And if it is forgiven, when it comes to tax time, the expenses that I kind of used with my PPP funds for, and I had those expenses forgiven, can I deduct those on my tax return? At the moment, the IRS is saying no. That's something that we're expecting to kind of, there's to be lots and kind of kicking and screaming about from kind of CPA practitioners and small business owners, because they think that's kind of not in the spirit of the law. But we would just say that this information changed the whole time. We've got an in-house CPA here at Bench. We've got a consult team ready at the end of the phone. So if anyone's got any questions or they've got a specific individual case, we'll be delighted to chat them through it.
Amazing. I see Richard dropped in some resources for you guys there. So again, for anyone who's just tuning in partway through, my name is Daniel, and I'm here with Oscar from Bench.
Hello.
And we've just been chatting a little bit about PPP, and I think some of the key points you brought up there relate to tax and, like, how to manage your tax. And so I'd love to kind of jump to that of very, very soon I have to be thinking about closing my books, entering tax season, and I'm curious now, like, when I'm in flight, like every day I'm just focused on operating my business, what are things, if you would give me, the unexpected tax tips or unexpected or, maybe common mistakes you see people making when they're in the operating mode that, ends up hurting them later on, that maybe there's a simple thing I can, even if I'm managing my stuff on Excel, ideally I'm going to go call you and sign up for Bench, and that's, the best way to do it. But let's say I'm not there yet and I'm managing on a spreadsheet. Is there something you can do to help me of just how to think about doing things properly?
Yeah. First thing is, there's no requirement for you to do monthly books. Like, there's no kind of there's no stipulation in regards to taxes that you need to show monthly records or anything like that. It just makes a huge amount of sense. If you're running your business and you're doing whatever you can to grow it, and you have a wild year, you've just made it through the busiest time of the year in the holiday season, and you suddenly get to January, February, March, and you haven't done any of that, it is a nightmare picking back through receipts, invoices, bank statements, credit card statements, Stripe reports, payroll reports, and getting that all together in like a 2-3 month period is a hell of a task when you're still actually trying to run a business. And so my first tip to people would be to stay on top of it when it's happening in the here and now, because you, like, future Oscar would be thanking current Oscar, 3 months down the line, if I had, all my IRS deductible expense categories, and I had all my transactions categorized by those certain categories, you're saving yourself such a headache when it gets to kind of crunch time at the end of March, beginning of April. So that's the major tip. It's not a big one. It's just something that's easy to forget. And a lot of people just try and run their business out their checking account when things are going well. It's like, I don't want to spend 4 hours a week on a spreadsheet to track this sort of stuff, but it pays dividends. In terms of kind of like tips and tricks, especially if you're running an e-commerce business, there's so much that you're spending your money on throughout the course of the year that you may not be aware that can actually is a deductible expense. And just the kind of super high level deductible expense means that the money that you spent on this particular thing, you can take that off your business income at the end of the year. So it effectively means that the amount of income that's going to get taxed is lower, so your overall tax bill is lower. Some of the things that I see people missing that I think are kind of awesome ones to know about are things like shipping costs. I mean, it sounds obvious, but the shipping cost that you pay in order to run an e-commerce business. Also, the packaging that you use, envelopes, big boxes, things like that you use to actually ship products, all deductible expenses. A big one is like tools that you use to actually run your business. So things like SEO services, like if you're paying for Hootsuite to manage your social, or if you're paying for other things to manage online advertising campaigns, most of these are going to be deductible expenses. So there's a huge amount out there, and it's definitely worth folks educating themselves before they get down to actually filing that tax return. Again, like there's an awesome resource on the Bench blog. I saw this morning that Shopify have got an awesome list for e-commerce sales of deductible expenses come tax time. So there's plenty of free stuff out there for people to have a look at.
That's great. Yeah, so again, and by the way, for anyone who's just tuning in, or for those who've been watching, please drop your questions in the chat. We see the steady feed, and I appreciate you guys already commenting and engaging. And if you're new here, I'm here with Oscar from Bench, and so we're talking a little bit about tax deductions and ways to handle that. I think one new thing that you probably wouldn't have planned for, and I would assume a lot of majority of people have not thought through, is if I've, midway through the year, I had to move to a work from home environment. So maybe I still have an office expense that I'm incurring that maybe I'm deducting before, because that's, maybe I'm used to doing that. But how do I deal with I'm calling you from my kitchen, I'm not sure what room in the house you are in. I've wondered, can I deduct that? How do I deduct it? What percentage? How do I make sure I do it in a way that I won't get audited? Or if I do, I'm like in the clear. And to me, that's always a very opaque topic that I think very few of us understand, because we've never had to worry about it or figure it out. And then same thing for, my employees and stuff like that. How do I think about that?
Yeah. And the employees one is, I'm going to go ahead and confess ignorance on this one, because I know it's a super gray area. Like even at Bench, it's been, I'm sure it's the same for you, Dan. You've gone from a situation where you've been working in an office to working from home. And I know that for employees of a company, this comes with potential personal income tax deductions that are out there. But I can tell you I'll be researching it, because I don't want to pay more tax than I have to, but I don't know the answer off the top of my head. In terms of small business owners, this home office expense is a big one. And there's a couple of different ways people can do it. Basically what you're looking at is in terms of the kind of the standard method that most people think about is working out, right, what's the space that I use for conducting business in my home? And the key thing is there's a couple of criteria. The key one is it has to be a dedicated space. It can't just be I open my laptop and I put it on my kitchen table, and then I'm highly mobile, I move around. Unfortunately, that's what's going to count. It needs to be a dedicated home office workspace area. It's a good idea to take pictures of it. If you ever run into something, because this sort of expense is something that the IRS takes a close look at. But what you're doing is, once you've worked out the percentage square foot of that space in your home, you're then totaling up everything that you spend on kind of home expenses. So kind of mortgages, rent, upkeep cost, utilities, gas, electric, all that sort of stuff. You take the full total of that, and then you just apply the percentage of your that you've already kind of figured out for your workspace, and then that's the amount that you can deduct from your tax return. There is a simplified method, which is just you deduct $5 per square foot of your home that you use as a business property. But that goes up to a maximum of 300 square feet, and you have to be able to prove that you're using that whole property for business purposes, which is sometimes pretty tricky.
Yeah, depends how big of a place you have. It's like, oh yeah, of course I need my entire home, my entire living room rather, to operate this business that I run from a 15-inch laptop.
Yeah. But yeah, again, like the consult team here at Bench can definitely walk that through in a little bit more detail on how to do it in practice. The other thing that I will add, just to kind of CMA a little bit, is that this is an area that, like I said, that in terms of the IRS activity and they like to audit, is one that they'll usually focus on. Like, because it's quite easy to get a bit liberal with interpretations, you want to make sure that you can back up whatever you're claiming.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. You complete ignorance on this question because we didn't talk about it, but it just came to mind right now. Is something I've noticed a lot of our customers trying to navigate, and a lot of founders trying to navigate, is to grow their business by selling internationally. So, one thing, for example, if you sell any, and this comes from one of our other partners, Passport Shipping, they've recently launched this tool because if you are selling into the UK market from any other market, you now have to apply for it. Yeah, amazing. I mean, you can tell us some tips about that at the end if we want to, when we can travel again, where we should visit. But now, they want their take of all the great things happening in the UK. So you have to apply for a UK VAT number. To be able to sell into the UK as of like January 1st, as an example. So for anyone watching, if you sell into the UK, please make sure you check that you need a UK VAT number, or else eventually you're going to be running into issues there. So that aside, I'm just curious, for any of your clients in general that have international income, so non-US income, is there anything that I should be worried about or thinking about if I have an international component to my business?
I mean, you should definitely be thinking about it from a tax perspective, and this is one where you're really going to be wanting to talk to a CPA, because the main thing here is how you want to be avoiding double taxation wherever you are. You're going to be paying kind of tax on source in that place. You're going to be bringing, usually that you're going to be repatriating that earnings back to wherever you are. You're going to be sending it back to yourself. Are there going to be any other income taxes you're going to pay in your current kind of country, in the US, or if it's in Canada? Again, like this is not my area of expertise, but I do know that it can be a minefield. And this is certainly something, if it applies to you and you're expanding internationally, you want to make sure that you've got a CPA that you know very well and speak to quite often.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. One thing also on tax, which maybe everyone knows this, as I said at the beginning, I'm terrible at tax and bookkeeping, which is why I'm happy we're friends. So you can teach me all about it.
Sure.
Is this idea of like a tax extension? So is this something that always existed? Is that always possible, or is this just because of the PPP stuff? Like in the Canadian market, you were able to defer taxes and all that as part of our kind of relief efforts. Tell me a bit more about like tax extension, how I apply for it. Am I eligible? Is this new, or am I just an ignorant person and didn't know about it?
Hey, well, it got a lot of publicity this year because it's kind of jog everyone's memory. What happened was that there was the tax deadline originally every year. It's the same, April 15th. This year, what the government did in the US is they extended that out to July the 15th, and gave people that little grace period to kind of get themselves in order, because a lot of people, weren't able to go and see their tax professional because, of lockdowns and such. What has always been the case is there's always been the ability to extend, to get that and apply for a tax extension. And this is an extension to file, not to pay. This is a big thing that people often don't appreciate. They get to February and they think, right, I'm going to extend to October the 15th and give myself a little bit of breathing room. You still have to make your estimated tax payment by April the 15th. Otherwise, penalties and interest are going to accrue, and you're going to, again, start getting letters from the IRS, and they're not going to be pleasant ones. Something that people are thinking about is, can I, if I made a loss this year and I'm not expecting to pay any tax, do I have to file by this time? And again, yes, there are failure to file penalties that are out there, and you don't want to start accumulating those, particularly if you weren't expecting to pay any tax. So it absolutely makes sense to stay on top of things, file your returns, get them done by the deadline. And if you don't think you're going to be able to do that, file an extension. It's really easy to do. You go to the IRS website. There's an e-filing system, e-filing service. You just download the correct form to fit your kind of business entity type, and you go from there.
Got it. No, I think that's super helpful. I think we have some more links in the chat. And again, I think we're just coming up on the last few minutes of our conversation together. So if anyone has any burning questions, please drop it in the chat. Laurie, I'm glad you're finding some of this useful, and hopefully some of the other folks are enjoying this little conversation. Really, I think maybe we can kind of end off, at least on this business side of things, of as you are seeing your clients going into 2021, as they are kind of trying to get themselves sorted out of whatever happened in this crazy year for them. Is there, are you seeing any kind of best practices of how they're organizing their back office, of how they're
Sure.
automating it? And again, there's lots of stuff on the Bench blog that people can check out, and obviously using the Bench tool I think will be very, very helpful too. But just, things I should think about that I haven't thought about automating before, or kind of new opportunities that didn't exist, based on how the world has changed in the past 9 months.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's something that we talk about a huge amount, and going into the next year, as a founder and as a business owner, you're going to be thinking, ideally you'll be thinking, how can I grow this business? How can I grow my top line by keeping my costs as fixed as possible, and adding margin and adding profit whilst I'm doing it? And a huge way to do that is through automating your back office, and not, as you grow, not having to employ people who kind of come with costly salaries to do things like that. And yeah, we have, bookkeeping is one of them. Bench will cost you, anything from 150 up to $250 a month to take care of all your finances month in, month out. If you kind of have HR things and payroll that you're running, we recommend going and seeing folks like Gusto, who take care of all of that. If you're sending invoices out to clients, FreshBooks is a great option for that. If you're running if you're running CRM and you have kind of complicated marketing campaigns and you want to engage with your audience, we partner with another company called Keep, who have an awesome kind of automated CRM program. So there's a huge amount you can do. There's tons of businesses out there. I know, Dan, for example, that you work with a huge amount of awesome vendors that help founders kind of automate what they're doing and kind of increase their returns on capital in their business. So I would speak to Clearbanc, I would speak to Bench. We can definitely point you in the right direction for getting as much automated as possible.
Yeah, no, I appreciate bringing that up. And we have some great questions I'll address here very quickly. Natalie, so Bench is focused on American companies and American tax codes.
Yep.
Right. So yeah, all of this is generally pointers around American tax and bookkeeping. Certainly, feel free to reach out to me directly. We know some folks here in Canada that can also help. In terms of partners, as a quick point on that, if you are an e-commerce business, we have a free tool at Clearbanc where we can give you insights and valuation and benchmarking, so you can understand how you're performing against your peers. But more importantly, we use that data to actually help recommend different types of partners for you. So if you're looking for a great email marketing solution or SMS marketing solutions, or looking to meet an agency to help you offload some of that work, we have a number of different partners that can help on that front. We have a question here from Tori. Should I think about getting my bookkeeping in order before end of year? What's a good lead time to set my business up going well into tax season? So yeah, so tax season is coming up. I was like, oh, it's April 2021. I'll deal with that in May 30th. Yeah, that's how most of us think about it. So tell me why I'm thinking about that in the wrong way, and how I should actually set myself up for success.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Tori, the earlier the better. And like I said, there's no requirement kind of legally or otherwise to have monthly books, but you are making your life so much easier by doing it. To kind of set the scene come tax time, right? Traditionally, folks will kind of be trying to get all their bookkeeping and stuff tied up for the end of the year, and they'll probably be working with a tax preparer or a CPA or something like that that's also working with like several hundred other businesses. And so if you go to that CPA just with a pile of bank statements, just being like, oh, I need to get everything sorted by year end, they're going to laugh at you and be like, look, I've got so many other companies I'm trying to help. I just don't have the bandwidth to do this. And you're going to be stuck picking through your bank statements, trying to categorize everything so you can give your kind of P&L and your balance sheet over to that tax preparer to make their job a bit easier. With that in mind, it makes so much more sense to make sure you have monthly organized financial statements, month in, month out. If you don't want to do it yourself, hire an online bookkeeper to do it for you. And when tax season comes around, it'll be a complete breeze.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of other, from my own experience, and I would also caveat that I did not do this perfectly, so I share this advice as more retroactively looking. I wish I'd done it better. Is when I think about putting expenses on cards, like it depends on the scale of your business. If you're large enough that you have corporate cards and stuff like that, obviously makes life easier. If you guys are like me and want to hoard all the airline points and stuff like that, you'll put on your personal cards. But try your best to pick one card at least where all those business expenses go. Ideally, the one that gets you the most points, and that at least simplifies your expense tracking and gives you a double benefit of earning points on all those different transactions, which is kind of found money in a different regard. But at least that way, you're only going to reconcile one card. It's very simple to dump that data out and parse through it. And even if it's not 100% business, if you can't do it that way, at least I only have to look at one card versus multiple cards. So.
Dan, thanks for that. Doing my job for me. That is a great, that's a great example. And I'd also say, just in the chat, I've seen that Richard on our team has chucked in a fantastic Bench blog article, which is all about preparing for tax season.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, I think we're coming up on time, and so maybe since we were talking a little bit about the UK, tell us what do you where in the UK are you from? Where should we go when we can travel? What are the what's the must-see thing I should do? What's the beer I should drink?
All of them. Yeah, I'm from an awesome little town in the southwest of England called Bristol. Small little place, but it's got a bustling art scene, some amazing kind of architectural wonders. There's an incredible bridge there, which I mean it sounds pretty dull, but when you go, you'll understand. Loads. It's like an amazing old port. Very, very cool town. Also, just like an amazing emerging foodie scene. And my sister back home, she supplies veg boxes to local restaurants, and cool. And some of the places that springing up around Bristol are really, really great. So if you go to the UK, it's slightly off the beaten track, but it's an awesome town. You should definitely check it out.
Amazing. Well, there you go. I'm sure everyone has read this concept of when you plan vacations, often you get like the most joy from the planning versus the actual trip itself. So I've certainly been dreaming about different places I want to visit and go once we can all travel safely again. And so I'll leave that as a nice little tip for all you guys. If you guys want to pick a new place to go, check out Bristol. Oscar will hook you up with all the great recommendations. But there you go. Otherwise, we have some great resources left in the chat. I appreciate everyone for tuning in. Oscar, thank you so much for participating in our first ever Live with Clearbanc with our partners at Bench.
This was a blast. Thanks so much, Dan.
Awesome. Well, great. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And I think we'll take it from there. Tori, you can show us out. Thank you all.